Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. You'll notice the studio looks a little different this week. We're in the Dwight D. Eisenhower Conference Room at the USDA building in Washington, D.C., joined this week by Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for giving us the time to have this conversation.
Well, I hope y'all had a wonderful Christmas, and we're looking forward to a great 2026.
Before we get to 2026, let's talk about 2025. Your first year as head of the USDA, you had to hit the ground running, Secretary Rollins. As you reflect back on this past year, what's been one of your most proud accomplishments so far? Well,
I think there are a lot that we have been working really hard. I mean, clearly we inherited a challenging situation, especially for our farmers and ranchers. No new trade deals, huge trade deficit, et cetera. So just looking back on the last year and reopening the markets across the world, reorienting USDA around farmers first, moving out all of the programs that we didn't believe aligned with our values or our smaller rural communities. But I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be the One Big Beautiful bill that, frankly, at the beginning of the year, I started talking to a lot of our friends on the Hill, some of the ag leaders, Senator Bozeman, Congressman Thompson, and others, and it seemed so far out of reach that in the reconciliation bill, now called the One Big Beautiful bill, that we could include a lot of the farm bill that had not been passed. And as I traveled around the country in the spring, a lot of what I heard from farmers everywhere I go, I do a farmer roundtable so I can talk directly to farmers. And at every single roundtable, we've got to get a new farm bill. We've got to get a new farm bill. That didn't happen in the last administration. So we got basically most of what would have been in a new farm bill, reference prices, tax provisions, 45Z, et cetera, in the One Big Beautiful reconciliation bill, which I think has given, and we'll see that effectuated next year. So the results of that, the farmers haven't felt just yet, but they will next year. So I'm really proud of that, but really proud of building a team, being part of President Trump's cabinet, and working every day, all day, 7 days a week to make not just America great again, but from my perspective, agriculture as well.
Now, you mentioned the lack of a real farm bill, but the inclusion of a lot of those components into the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. From your perspective at the USDA, is the agency waiting on anything more from Congress in a farm bill to accomplish your mission? Or did One Big Beautiful Bill get you most of the way there?
No, I think we got most of the way there. The way I think about it is maybe 80% of the way there, but I think there's still a lot we can do with loans, there's so much of average age of a farmer is 58 years old. We've lost 150,000 family farms in the last stretch of a number of years. These are numbers that are unsustainable, and if we don't change the trajectory of agriculture in this country and supporting our local farmers and ranchers, building our rural communities, I believe we'll lose America. I think it's that important. The opportunity, you've got a big national security component on this as well. As we've lost all of those family farms, we've seen major consolidation. We've seen a lot of foreign countries come in and buy a lot of our farmland, a lot of our ag companies. This has to stop as well. You know, if you can't feed yourself, you will never really know what freedom is. So these are fairly significant, some may say existential threats to not just our agriculture community, but to the future of our country as well. And so, yes, I believe that a skinny farm bill is important. I have been speaking with the top leaders on the Hill on both sides of the aisle. I was on the call with Senator Klobuchar at about 10 o'clock last night talking about some of this. So there is some left to do, but I want to make sure that we realize what a significant achievement that was for agriculture, for rural communities. It's the largest investment in rural America that has ever been made that came through that One Big Beautiful Bill. And I give credit to President Trump. I also give credit to members of our cabinet that were negotiating that bill on the Hill with Senator Thune and Speaker Johnson. But we've still got some ways to go. But a great achievement that we should be proud of.
Now, you mentioned it did take a team to sort of drive the One Big Beautiful Bill, particularly coming from the cabinet perspective. Working in this administration, working with this cabinet, are you able to explain agriculture to the other members? Do you feel as if they understand the industry you're representing?
You know, it's such a great question. I mean, yesterday I was on the phone with our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, 2 or 3 times, talking soybeans and sorghum. Then I was on with Howard Lutnick, our Secretary of Commerce, for a couple of different phone calls talking about getting water from Mexico for our southern farmers. That's been a little dicey for our citrus guys down there and row croppers. Also, I was on the phone with Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of War, yesterday, talking about farmland being purchased near military bases. This is just yesterday. And for your viewers at home, they may not know that this is unprecedented. Normally, cabinet secretaries may see each other every few months at a cabinet meeting and say hello, or at a Christmas party, but this cabinet is very, very, very different. We had a couple weeks ago, we meet on cattle every month, and I've got 6 or 7 cabinet members in the Roosevelt Room in the White House talking about building the beef herd, what we need to do to support our ranchers, et cetera. And it really is 6 or 7 cabinet members, not staff, not chiefs of staff, not deputy secretaries. These are my counterparts. And we had one, I don't know, it was maybe 4 or 6 weeks ago. And J.D. Vance walked in the room, our vice president. He was walking some congressmen around and just showing them the Roosevelt Room in the White House. And he stopped and he saw all of us and he said, my goodness, what is going on? Are there major national security decisions being made? And it may have been Kelly Loeffler, our small business administrator, who's part of the cabinet. Maybe Doug Burgum, but one of them said, "Oh no, Brooke has called us all here to talk about cattle," and then someone else has joked, "Never before in the history of America, except maybe George Washington, have we talked more about row crops in an Oval Office than in this administration." So there are a lot of reasons for that, but there is no question that this cabinet, that this president, that this vice president are focused, I would argue, more than any top administration ever before. U.S. Ag Secretary will always be focused on this, but the fact that the rest of the cabinet is as well, pushing agriculture at the top of every trade deal. Now, we talked about the One Big Beautiful Bill as a major accomplishment, but more than 24 trade deals with agriculture leading the way, opening these markets up. That is a massive reorientation of an entire world economy around American agriculture. So there's a lot to be proud of, and I hope that everyone watching can feel that and understands how hard we're fighting here.
I love to hear that. Folks talking about our industry, taking a real interest in what's happening on the ground. You mentioned discussions about the cattle market. That's been a hot topic.
Yes.
What's ahead? What can we expect from the USDA on the cattle front?
We released I think a 4 or 5 point plan 2 months ago, really trying to get aggressive and ensure that we're doing everything we can to support our cattle ranchers. We're at a 75-year herd number low. Of course, it's a supply and demand question. We have higher demand for our beef than ever before. And by the way, Bobby Kennedy and I, through MAHA, are going to be issuing new dietary guidelines in probably just a few weeks. That is going to reorient a lot of the food system in America around locally produced, healthier food, which is such a huge win for our farmers that, serving school children lunches out of boxes and microwaves, we're pivoting away from that. And USDA spends $400 million every day on 16 nutrition programs, including SNAP. So the market moving ability to buy healthier, locally grown food to support local farmers, I think is going to be historical.
Okay.
So that's huge as well. So yeah, there are so many wins coming, I think. But as far as the beef herd goes, ensuring we're opening up 5 million more acres of land in the West, federal government-owned land. We're streamlining the AUM process so that they don't have to go through Interior and USDA. We're opening up local processing plants so that a cattle rancher in Virginia doesn't have to haul his cattle to the middle of the country to process. Ensuring that we are supporting as best we can, but also understanding this will take time. It takes 2 years. The president likes to compare how quickly we got the price of eggs down to ensuring that we need to get the price of beef down, especially ground beef. But I think that having the ability, and I treasure it every day, to educate my fellow cabinet members and the top of our government here on agriculture and really supporting our ranchers and making sure that we can do that. And it's not mutually exclusive to bring prices down as well. So we're making a lot of progress on those fronts, and there's more to come on that.
It's a delicate balancing act, and we'll have more with Secretary Rollins in just a moment. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Our conversation is ongoing with America's Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. And Secretary Rollins, you mentioned the team effort coming from the cabinet on a lot of issues around agriculture. We've also seen a few new investigations launched here in the ag industry. One taking a look at ag input suppliers, and another taking a look at the meat processing industry. Let's talk ag input suppliers first.
Yeah.
What's the role of the USDA in an investigation like this?
Well, I think first it's important to level set why this is an extremely relevant conversation. So when we look at the farm economy and we look at the real struggle that so many of our row croppers, but specialty croppers are facing right now as well, years of no profit, surviving year to year. They don't want to farm for government checks, but at the end of the day, we have to ensure that we can continue these farmers doing what they do best. So when you look at what's happened in the last 4 years before President Trump came back and our administration took back over, is the cost of inputs on average for farmers increased between 30 and 40%. You've got interest rate increase of 73% for our farmers. Labor increased 47% for our farmers. Fertilizer, seed, fuel. I mean, it is property taxes, one thing after another. So when you see, basically prices aren't going up for the product, but the cost to do business continues to rise higher and higher and higher, you have a real problem on your hands. And the other thing is when you're looking at the market and you're looking at the economy, you see these numbers just skyrocketing while you see, the profitability and the sales of these crops either remaining stagnant or going down. It doesn't make any sense. So the president has been unequivocal that he's here to support the farmer. We want to ensure that these input costs, and he mentioned the meatpacking, the 4 big companies where Department of Justice is now looking into very deeply. But also this past weekend, we looked at some price fixing. He issued an executive order on the issue, what that could look like. So we will see. What we do know is that when we're looking at the charts, we're looking at the numbers, we're looking at what these farmers are facing, it doesn't seem right. And we have to understand why that is and then what we can do to fix it. Now, there's some good examples, right? Fertilizer, we rely on other countries because we don't have as much of that naturally here. We haven't been mining it recently. So while we're looking at the short term, we're also figuring out the long-term solutions. We're opening up some new mines. We're going to be looking at producing, onshoring a lot of that fertilizer, the phosphates, et cetera, here in America to try to bring those costs down. We know fuel is already coming down. We know interest rates are coming down. Labor, we did some major H-2A reforms in the last few months. We expect a $2 billion savings for our farmers on that just next year, which will be about a 30% decrease in labor, which is really exciting. So we're looking at all of that. It is an all of the above approach. This administration runs as fast as we can all week, every week, and I think we're going to see some good news on inputs next year.
So we do think it's probably a year process. These investigations certainly take time to get the correct information out. So you're expecting hopefully 2026 have some more information?
Well, I think not. Yes, I think we'll have a lot more sooner than middle 2026, maybe first quarter, as far as information. But we also have a policy process that is going alongside each of these major inputs. To bring interest rates down looks very different than bringing the cost of seed or fertilizer down. Opening up processing plants when we're talking about the meat packers. I was on the phone with some North Dakota meat packers about a month ago, and one of them said for $30,000, $40,000 more dollars, a grant from USDA, we could go from slaughtering one head or processing one head to processing 15. And if I get a new grinder. So it's just these sort of macro, the macro is important. We're talking about the macro all the time, but also how do we move into these communities? How do we help them build ecosystems, agriculture systems that allow us to deconsolidate, deregulate, and bring a lot more of this processing back locally?
Now, you mentioned the antitrust potential investigation from the DOJ into the meat processing. From the USDA's perspective, you're not an enforcement arm.
Correct.
What does your role in encouraging more competition look like here at the USDA?
Well, our role is significant because we have a large amount of grant opportunities. We have a lot of different teams working here at USDA through different mission areas that allow us to really focus on rural communities where we can invest to the tune of billions of dollars. And there, and one of the big accomplishments I think of this administration working to correct what we believe were some real missteps of the Biden administration. there was so much effort and focus put on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of effort put on climate change, funding. We were funding grants in San Francisco for, gay, transgender farmers to get food justice out. The USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, was funding research in other parts of the country on transgender issues with mice. I mean, it was crazy. So we have canceled and reoriented hundreds of billions of dollars at this point to focus on the farmer, focus on the rancher, and to get out of the business of the cultural wars that are going on in America right now.
So as you look ahead to 2026, still on the meat side, do you expect to see more push for smaller processors, different processing type actions out there in the countryside?
Well, yes, that's a big part of our beef plan. Our cattle plan is how we make sure as we're rebuilding the herds and we're incentivizing all of the above, especially younger ranchers, getting young people excited about moving back to rural communities. We've actually seen a trend, the first time in 100 years, where younger Americans are wanting to live not in the big city, but go back and live, in rural communities. But opening up the markets, getting less expensive loans, increasing new rancher farmer loans from 5 years to 10 years, things like that we're doing that incentivize, working with the veteran VA, Doug Collins, the Secretary of the VA, to get more veterans. I mean, farmers and veterans are our hardest working Americans. So how do we get more veterans into the business of ranching and farming, even a smaller, having a couple 10 head of cattle or a small plot of land to farm. So there's a lot of really great things that we're going to be doing on that in the new year. We're super excited about that.
Lots to come here from the USDA. That is always exciting to hear. And Secretary Rollins, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us and talk through these policies, because they certainly do have a real impact on the ground across rural America.
Thank you.
Folks, leave it here. We'll have more to come from the USDA later on in the program. We'll have conversations with Undersecretary Richard Fordyce, and we'll also be talking with other folks here at the USDA, so leave it right here. Closed captioning this week is brought to you by Farm Progress. Their team of experts reports on innovative solutions and essential information for your farm business. Visit farmprogress.com to stay updated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We continue this week's show here at the USDA building in Washington, D.C. And joining me now is Merrill Kennedy. She's the CEO of the Kennedy Rice Mill. And Merrill, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, you're here in Washington, D.C. because you joined President Trump and Secretary Rollins for the announcement of the $12 billion bridge payment. Why was that something that was important to you at the Kennedy Rice Mill?
Well, I think it's incredibly important because rice farmers are probably having the worst year in the last 40 that they've ever had, right? So I think the amount of support that is needed is great, but I also wanted to be there with the President and the Secretary to really show that, we're doing something for our American farmers.
Now, here in the U.S., rice is considered a specialty crop, and there's probably a lot of folks in our audience, myself included, who have never grown rice. We don't know what that market's like. Can you fill us in on the challenges you've seen for your region here over the past year?
It hasn't even just been the past year. It's actually been a decade coming. So we've seen record imports over the last several years, which has really been driving prices down, and that has really caused some of the problems that we've been facing as an industry. But rice is grown in Mississippi, it's grown in Louisiana, it's grown in Arkansas, Texas, and California. It is a specialty crop, but it's one of the oldest crops in the United States. So it's really a special crop grown in water, actually, and rotated, with soybeans and other, and even in the southern part of Louisiana, crawfish.
Interesting. And I would imagine it is an input-intensive crop, correct? Flooding those fields and getting things planted. It's an expensive crop to put in the ground.
Rice is actually probably the most expensive crop to put in the ground. Arguably, the cotton people would probably say they might be a little bit more expensive, but I believe rice is probably the most today.
So the Kennedy Rice Mill, talk us through your business. How do you engage with rice growers, and can consumers find your products here just out at grocery stores?
So rice growers are truly like our heartbeat of our company. If we don't have growers, we can't do anything. And it's actually our growers is the reason why I was there Monday with the President. A few weeks ago, they asked me to send a letter to the president in support, trying to see if they could do anything to help us. I reluctantly did, and he answered. So, an incredible story, truly, but they are the heartbeat of our company. We take rice still to this day from the field to a finished product, so all the way through the milling process, and then, we had distribution, and my sisters and I actually have our own rice brand, Four Sisters, as well.
That is fantastic. So we can find Four Sisters just out in the grocery store.
You can find Four Sisters out in the grocery store. We also supply a lot of large CPG companies, with their rice needs across America and abroad, but it's been fun for my sisters and I to do something special together.
Now, you mentioned you wrote a letter to the administration, and that's what put you on the radar. What sort of message were you passing along to the president in that letter? Were you talking about the hardships that you've seen from your growers?
We were talking about the hardships that we've seen from our growers. We were talking about, please help us stop some of these imports pressure coming into the country, right? We were talking about just how much losses the rice community is going to take. And it's not just about the growers, although they're the most important. It's also when farming dries up, so do the rural communities, right? So do the people that work around that. We employ around 200 people in a town of 1,000. So it's important for rural America, industries, food processors, manufacturers, right? Everyone, truck drivers, anyone that's associated with rural America.
That's true. It is a big net that gets impacted from anything that touches agriculture. And you mentioned one of the challenges that your growers have seen are increased imports. Has that been the main driver of these lower prices for your farmers over the past decade?
We believe so. Imports now are about 30% of our market, where we can actually produce all the rice that's needed in the domestic market. And the consumers are changing, right? They're wanting to eat different types of rices, but we can grow those rices here in America. So we just need companies to invest in the American grower, help us develop the seeds that are needed, right? Help us think about, changing consumer demand. And I think that that's not much different than what other commodities are also seeing, right? We can do those things. We have the best researchers, the best universities, best agriculture extension services, and we just need to put those people to work.
Absolutely. And that is, of course, a great place for the USDA to encourage those kind of actions and research. And, of course, we're talking to a lot of consumers here on this program. We're in the holiday season. If you've got folks out there, if you could pass a message along to viewers here in America about the rice industry, what would you tell them? What do we need to know to help bring profitability back to your region?
Well, I appreciate that question, truly, because if I could ask anything from Santa Claus, it would be that, people really start paying attention to where their food comes from and thinking about how they can support the U.S. farmer, but also how they can support their neighbors next door, right? Because we're all part of agriculture, truly. And so whether that be at a farmer's market or whether that be at the grocery store, you can find products from all over this beautiful nation. And so I hope that when our consumers are out looking for something to cook for their holiday meals, that they think about that.
Think about it and check the label.
That's
Figure
right.
out where it comes from.
That's
and
right.
Spend your dollars to support your fellow citizens. That would be the message.
That would be the message.
Merrill Kennedy, thank you so much for joining this week. Really appreciate the discussion, and thank you so much for sharing some insight about how things look on the ground in rice country.
Well, I appreciate being here. I appreciate the support of the American farmer, and I appreciate the administration doing something to make sure that our way of life continues.
It is good to see. Folks, leave it here. We'll have a conversation coming up with Undersecretary Richard Fordyce when we come back.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Pioneer, the one that started it all and the one to count on when every bushel counts. Plant the 100th season at pioneer.com/100.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to This Week in Agribusiness. This week in Washington, D.C. at the USDA building. We came into town to talk with Secretary Rollins, sort of a year in review, and while we were here, we had the chance to catch a press conference with our friends at the USDA about regenerative agriculture. Brooke Rollins addressed the group.
Today, we are launching a new Farmer First
Regenerative Agriculture Pilot Program, which will invest $700 million specifically to support regenerative agriculture. We will deliver this support through existing programs our farmers already know and already trust. Protecting and improving the health of our soil is critical, not only for the future viability of farmland, but to the future success of American farmers. In order to continue to be the most productive and most efficient growers in the world, we must protect our topsoil from unnecessary erosion and boost the microbiome of the soil. Today's announcement encourages these priorities while supporting farmers to transition to regenerative agriculture if they so choose. This is a Farmers First pilot program and the first of its kind. The pilot brings USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, we have our incredible leaders here, Aubrey Betancourt, back to its core mission, helping people help the land through whole farm, outcome-based voluntary conservation that our producers trust. For too long, our conservation programs have been severely fragmented. This pilot replaces that fragmentation with one unified process that evaluates everything at one time. Whole farm planning is the centerpiece, ensuring that all resource concerns such as soil, water, and natural vitality are addressed together, not one piece at a time. Producers will benefit from a single application, reducing red tape and making conservation easier to access and our programs more impactful. As President Trump has done since day one, we are committed to restoring America's natural strength by empowering producers with simple outcome-based tools. Producers at every stage, from beginners just starting with cover crops to advanced operation with years of conservation experience, many of those are represented by our farmers today, will find a pathway through this pilot. Each producer's results will be measured and credited back to the farmer through an outcomes report, recognizing and rewarding improvements they achieve on their own land. This initiative puts American farmers first as part of the solution to make America healthy again, but by supporting access to American-grown whole foods that are critical to addressing the chronic disease crisis nationwide. Using the Sustains Act, we will bring corporate, label, and supply chain partners directly into partnership with NRCS, supporting regenerative agriculture adoption, farmer recognition, and consumer education.
I had the chance to ask what criteria NRCS would be using to make these determinations, and Chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, Aubrey Betancourt, answered.
The criteria is the same as it has and always been. It's EQIP and CSP. These are our standing programs that take year-round applications. There's nothing new. It'll be the same application that our farmers know already. The difference is they'll be able to apply for multiple practice on a single application. What's important about that is it ties back to that whole farm plan. The idea being that we're going to look at all of the resource concerns on the property at one time instead of drive-by conservation, where we're only looking at maybe soil health here and maybe in a few years we're going to look at water management. No, it's going to come back to a plan. Let's start working the plan with the farmer. This means we've got to put our NRCS staff back out in the field where the farmer, where they belong, and we're making incredible efforts and investment in that as well. The Secretary has been a tremendous champion of that. But this is the same EQIP and CSP rolling contracts as we have all throughout the year.
Folks, when we come back, Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation Richard Fordyce will be joining us here, and he'll share more details on this new program from NRCS. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Just before the break, we watched that press conference with Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins unveiling the new regenerative farmer programs under the NRCS. Well, joining us now to get in a little bit deeper is Undersecretary Richard Fordyce. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us again.
Absolutely, Mike. Always good to be on with you.
Well, let's start with this regenerative agriculture proposal here coming from NRCS. We heard Aubrey Betancourt. This is a big pile of money. Talk about what this could mean on the farm.
Yeah, so it's $700 million, and it's not new money. It's just some money that we've tagged to be a part of this regen. We're calling it the regen pilot. And so basically it goes from, Aubrey likes to call it drive-by conservation or shotgun conservation, to the place where we're doing like a whole farm planning. We're going to look at soil health practices that improve soil health, practices that improve water quality, practices that are building soil health, making it more resilient, but looking at it from a whole farm perspective. Nothing new, same practices, but maybe a little different way to look at implementing it.
The difference would be before, if I had erosion issues on my farm that I wanted help with NRCS, we'd tackle that issue specifically. Now I take, as my understanding, my whole farm in, and we can come up with a suite of programs that maybe could help.
Yeah, and so again, not reinventing the wheel. They are programs that currently exist within NRCS, but again, taking a whole farm look. And I think, I think that farmers will appreciate that in the fact that, again, perfect example. An NRCS person comes onto the farm to address a single resource concern. Maybe notices something else, or the farmer or the rancher says, I've been wanting to talk to you about this. And so when we can look at that from a holistic standpoint, whole farm, holistic standpoint, I think it's gonna work. It is a pilot. So again, we just tagged some dollars that already existed within NRCS's budget to do this pilot. I think there's going to be good results coming out of it.
And we'll probably start to see those as we get through 2026. We'll begin to unpack kind of what all was done.
Right. So there is an outcome-based kind of report that goes along with this. So when a farmer enrolls in the Regen program, we'll do a baseline kind of soil health measurement or analysis, and then as we go forward, we'll have that outcome-based report that can talk about the improvements that they've made. Could it be increased organic matter, carbon sequestration number potentially? We don't know what all those look like right now, but it's going to be good.
The next year we'll be discovering all of those.
That's why it's a pilot.
Absolutely. And it's a good time to be running a pilot. As I understand, thanks to the One Big Beautiful Bill, NRCS should have ample funding as we get into 2026. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so in the One Big Beautiful Bill, a massive increase in their funding. Those dollars, I don't know that it quite doubles it, but it's a big increase in conservation spending, and I think that signals, really that's a signal from Congress that conservation is important. Soil health, the quality of water leaving farms and ranches is important. And I've been around the conservation space for a long time, and farmers are anxious to do what they can that's the best for their environment, their local environment, because they ultimately want to pass that farm on to the next generation in better condition than when they got it.
That's what it's all about. That is true sustainability, some might say. The ability to hand that farm down and keep it going.
It is.
Richard, as you think about what else could come, and let's keep the focus on NRCS. It's only one of the 3 areas you oversee, but as you look ahead to 2026, increase in funding, new pilot program, are you optimistic for what NRCS can get done as 2026 comes into focus?
Mike, we really are. And, another thing that we can add really to kind of the excitement going on within NRCS is more of a streamlined application process. I can remember some times when I would participate in NRCS programs and I kind of forgot I'd applied because it was so long before I heard anything. And so Chief Betancourt is really laser focused on, reducing application wait time, streamlining, application processes as we are across the entire mission area, but certainly within NRCS, quicker applications, hopefully quicker approvals, quicker dollars to put conservation on agricultural land.
Quicker dollars. That has been a trademark of this USDA over the past year. You guys have really found ways to get those dollars out to the grower, and it sounds like there's still more avenues you can pursue to make it even faster.
Yeah, I think, from our perspective in the mission area, one of those tools is going to be, and I know you and I have talked about this before, but that's modernizing our technology, our delivery system technology. It's going to be really important that we are meeting farmers where they are from a technology standpoint. We're going to get there before we get out of here.
Undersecretary Fordyce, we'll have more in just a little bit. I want to unpack some of those other mission areas you oversee when we come back. Folks, leave it here. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness coming up after the break. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this weekend. We're here in Washington, D.C., getting caught up with our friends at the USDA, and joining me now is Undersecretary of Farm Production and Conservation, Richard Fordyce. Richard, thanks for talking with us.
Absolutely, Mike.
We talked about the NRCS there at the start. Regen Ag is going to be a big focus, but you've got two other mission areas, RMA, crop insurance, and the FSA. Let's talk RMA first. I understand we also had some changes to RMA in the One Big Beautiful Bill?
So we did. There's what I think are really just kind of ingenious provisions to support new and beginning farmers. A lot of those things were sent our way through Congress. We've enacted some things just within USDA that are separate from the congressional delegation, but I think we all recognize that new and beginning farmers are critically important to the survival of American agriculture. And so in the One Big Beautiful Bill, one of the things that happened relating to Risk Management Agency was that new and beginning farmers had a 5-year window where they had some reduced premiums for coverage in their crop insurance policies. The One Big Beautiful Bill move that out to 10 years. So they're going to have 10 years of eligibility, which I think is really, it's going to be meaningful for them. The One Big Beautiful Bill, again, actually looks at that subsidy rate of what is the farmer going to pay and what does USDA pay from a premium standpoint. Those numbers have changed, a little higher subsidy, a little less premium that the producer's going to have, and some better guarantees. So I think those are good, right? So that's also signaling that Congress supports crop insurance and that risk management tool that we've had for a long time. Farmers are comfortable with it, they understand it, and so good things as it relates to RMA.
I've heard from a lot of my friends in the crop insurance industry that they're very pleased with Pat Swanson, the new head of the RMA. Have you heard that from folks in the industry?
I have heard that from folks in the industry. Pat was, when we started kind of putting the team together, from an insurance standpoint, Pat was a name that I had known for a long time. And I thought, boy, if we could find somebody that knew a lot about crop insurance, I wonder who that would be. And Pat's name just kept coming up.
That's fantastic. Of course, that's on the RMA side. That's just another third of what all you do. Farmers are probably most closely related to the FSA, which you oversee. Talk about what that operation is like here. When you're sitting in Washington, D.C., how much are you overseeing?
Yeah, so Farm Service Agency certainly is that third leg of the stool we call here at Farm Production and Conservation. That deliver a lot of the safety net programs, the loan programs, disaster programs, and some conservation programs. CRP, for example, is an FSA program. Lots of things going on with the Farm Service Agency, and because of kind of its structure and how it operates, local county offices, staff that are incredibly qualified to do a lot of things to support American agriculture. If there's a program, if there's a congressional ad hoc program, if there is a USDA ad hoc program that's directed to farmers, FSA is likely going to administer that. And so, a couple of weeks ago, we had the announcement for the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program, the $11 billion that's going to go out in economic support. FSA is going to administer that. A month and a half ago, we announced the last leg of the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program. FSA is going to administer that. So, again, if it's a safety net response to a safety net program, response to a disaster, an ad hoc program, whatever that may be, it's likely going to get done by FSA.
Early in the administration, there were concerns that county offices might go away, leases might end. Have you figured out how to keep everybody there going forward?
Yeah, I think the dust has settled as it relates to offices closing and whatnot. We did have a number of folks that took the voluntary retirement, which I think that was that employee's choice. Yeah. And I support, if they felt like that's what they needed to do, I support that 100%. So we are looking now at backfilling those positions, getting some folks back into those offices, maybe where we've got not quite enough coverage. We've got some great management tools that help us do that and can identify the spots that really need the help And so as we move forward here in this next year, we're going to look to making sure that we're going to be able to deliver mission critical services at a level that our farmers expect.
Fantastic. It's great to have it right there in the county. Richard, we've got just a few moments to go. Any thoughts to you as you look ahead to 2026?
You know, I'm anxious about 2026, honestly, with the implementation of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act provisions. An increase in reference prices. That's a direct correlation to ARC and PLC. Again, our primary safety net. If you are a farmer and you enroll ARC, PLC, don't know what to pick. Well, you don't have to pick anymore. You get the better of the two. So again, so there were things changed in the bill that really helped. So I'm anxious about what's happening going forward. We're seeing energy costs come down. We're seeing interest rates come down. Both of those are going to be super helpful as it relates to inputs. So I'm excited about what 26 looks like.
Fantastic. Richard Fordyce, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thanks, Mike.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We continue our conversation now with Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. Secretary Rollins, you mentioned the reorienting of global trade that we've seen under the administration so far. What are some of the big wins for agriculture that you're really excited about here as you look to the future?
You know, first I want to say that this has been a remarkable time in American history. In 500 years, I believe they'll look back at this specific administration, Trump 2.0, and it will reflect a turning point in world history. It was the moment that America stood up and said, no longer will we be beholden to the tariff regimes of other countries. And I think back to, Alexander Hamilton in 1791 was talking about the importance of being able to feed yourself. He called it the manufacturer's manuscript or something. He wrote a big piece on it that we've got to be able to build and feed ourselves. We cannot rely on other countries. And you think about the foresight of that, right? That was 1791, writing the Constitution, setting up a new government. And that is what built America the first 100 years. That mindset is how we became the most powerful country, the most important country, arguably in the history of the world, where self-governance reigned, based on our farmers and our ag community. Fast forward about 100 years, we get into this progressive mode, we start offshoring, start relying on other countries, move into this free trade, which again, we're all for free trade, but it's got to be fair free trade idea, and we start relying on other countries in the second 200 years or so. What President Trump and our administration is doing is reorienting back to, we have to put America first. So what this last year, really the last 9 months of new trade deals represents is an effectuation of that vision. And why that's so important is because certainly cars, certainly chips, certainly technology, that is all imperative to a future of America as the global superpower and freedom, frankly, in the world. But if we're not able to put our ag producers first, we're not able to feed ourselves, but also support agriculture, farmers and ranchers, then we will fall as one of the great world history superpowers. That is how important this is. So for our farmers and ranchers, these couple dozen new trade deals, more coming online every week as we speak. Agriculture has been at the front of all of it, whether it's rice into Japan, beef into Australia. Australia wouldn't take our beef for 23 years. Soybeans and ethanol into the UK. Every single deal that has been struck has had ag at the very top of the list. And every country is different. These are extremely complicated, very pages and pages of deals that our trade team, led by the incredible Jamison Greer, and then alongside Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent, three of our cabinet members, who I have all called now king of the row croppers, jokingly, because they have been putting soybeans and corn and sorghum and wheat and cotton and barley first in a lot of these negotiations. We'll begin to see all of this move. We're seeing some of it already, but we'll really begin to see it next year. And I think it's going to change the farm economy for good. I think we're going to move out of this year to year losing tens of thousands of farms because the money isn't being made. I think that's all changing. Again, you bring the cost of inputs down, which we've already talked about, and then you open up these new markets around the world, and hopefully we've set a new trajectory for the future of our country.
We just have a little bit of time left, Secretary Rollins, but domestically, is the USDA working to help drive domestic demand for American production as well?
Well, it's a great point, and there's no doubt about it. The first thing I'll say is how important year-round E15 is. President Trump tried to do that through the executive branch in the first term. It was overturned in the courts. Now we're really working with Congress to get that done. Biofuels, sustainable aviation fuel. And as I've traveled the world and I've learned about so much of how much the rest of the world is working on trying to bring their emissions down, how important American agriculture is to that. But also, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, as we release new dietary guidelines, as Bobby Kennedy and I work on making America healthier again. The chronic disease here is #1 in the world. That's not where you want to be. We spend more than every other country, many of them combined. So the solution to that, that's our farmers and having that locally produced, good, nutritious food. So I think the local demand, the in-country demand will continue to rise as we move back toward whole milk, as we move back toward protein-saturated fats, which is all coming, and then as we have the government programs to support all of that.
Fantastic. Look forward to a bright future for American agriculture.
Yes.
Secretary Rollins, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us this week.
Thank you. God bless you, and God bless our incredible farmers and ranchers. It's the honor of a lifetime to fight for them every single day.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, folks. Be sure to catch us next time right here for This Week in Agribusiness. Have a Happy New Year. This Week in Agribusiness is recorded in the Strauss Studio. Family owned since 1948 and trusted by pros worldwide, Strauss makes gear that works as hard as you do. Tough, functional, and resilient. This isn't just workwear, it's gear engineered to perform. Gear up now at Strauss.com.
This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.